Forget the Sunday school illustrations. Forget the brightly colored felt boards with a smiling man sitting by a sparkling blue stream, politely receiving a neatly wrapped loaf of bread from a friendly little bird. The reality of the ancient Near East was entirely different. It was brutal, unforgiving, and steeped in a kind of raw survival that we, in our modern comforts, can barely comprehend. We are standing in the middle of a catastrophic ecological and spiritual crisis in the northern kingdom of Israel. The sky has turned to iron. The earth is like bronze. A devastating drought has seized the land. But this is not just a meteorological event. It is a theological war. King Ahab and Queen Jezebel have plunged the nation into the worship of Baal, the Canaanite storm god, the deity supposedly responsible for rain, thunder, and agricultural fertility. Think about the political climate of this moment. Queen Jezebel was not just a corrupt ruler. She was systematically exterminating the prophets of Yahweh. She was running a state-sponsored religious genocide. The physical drought was a mirror of the spiritual desolation. The ground was cracking, the crops were turning to dust, and the people were starving, all while the priests of Baal danced and cut themselves, begging a deaf god for a drop of water. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, a rugged man from the obscure region of Gilead steps onto the stage of history. Elijah. His very name is a battle cry. My God is Yahweh. He walks right into the epicenter of power, right into the face of a murderous regime, and declares that there will be neither dew nor rain these years, except by his word. He publicly emasculates the cult of Baal. And then, God tells him to run, to hide. God sends his most wanted man into the arid, hostile wilderness, to a place called the Kerith Ravine, east of the Jordan. Elijah isn't just hiding from the weather. He is a fugitive with a bounty on his head. Every shadow could be an assassin. Every sound could be the king's guard. And there, alone in the dust, the sky darkens. But it is not a cloud of rain signaling the end of the drought. It is a flock of black birds descending from the scorching sky. Corvos, ravens. This is where the story gets deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. This is the detail that most churches completely gloss over in their teachings. For an ancient Israelite, the raven was not just a bird. It was the ultimate symbol of death, of decay, of absolute ritual impurity. They were scavengers, necrophages. In the strict dietary and purity laws laid out in the book of Leviticus, the raven is explicitly listed among the detestable things, the abominations of the sky. They were untouchable. To associate with them, let alone eat food from their beaks, was unthinkable for a holy man of God. And yet, this is the hook that should grab us by the collar and refuse to let go. Why would the God of Israel, the meticulous architect of the laws of purity, the God who demanded absolute holiness from his people, actively choose the most unclean, greedy, and selfish creature of the skies to sustain his most holy and powerful prophet? To truly grasp the magnitude of this paradox, we have to pause and look at the world through the lens of ancient Hebrew theology. The Levitical laws were not just arbitrary dietary suggestions. They were a profound, physical pedagogy, teaching the Israelites about life and death. God is the author of life. Therefore, anything associated with the realm of death, corpses, blood outside the body, and the creatures that feed on decay, was considered ritually impure. The Hebrew concept of tumah, often translated as uncleanness, carried a heavy weight. It meant you were temporarily disqualified from approaching the presence of God in the sanctuary. You carried the stain of mortality. Now, consider the raven, the Corvus corax. It is a brilliant, highly intelligent bird, but its survival strategy is deeply tied to death. They are opportunistic scavengers. Where there is a carcass, where there is slaughter, where there is famine, the ravens gather. They feast on the dead. When an animal fell in the wilderness, the ravens were the first to arrive, often going straight for the softest tissues, like the eyes. The book of Proverbs actually uses this horrifying imagery, warning that the eye that mocks a father will be pecked out by the ravens of the valley. In the book of Job, God himself points to the raven as a creature whose young cry out to God for lack of food, highlighting a brutal biological reality. Ravens are notoriously poor parents. They are known to abandon their nests, leaving their own offspring to fend for themselves or starve. They are the epitome of greed, taking whatever they can find, hoarding it, and fiercely protecting it from others. They do not share. It goes against every instinct wired into their dark, iridescent feathers. So, put yourself in Elijah's sandals. He is the champion of Yahweh. He is zealous for the law of Moses. He has just risked his life to stand up for the purity of Israel's faith against the paganism of Ahab. He goes to the wilderness, hungry, exhausted, and vulnerable. And what is his lifeline? A flock of unclean, death-eating, selfish birds dropping pieces of meat and bread at his feet. Where did they get the meat? Was it from a clean animal? Was it properly drained of blood according to kosher law? Did they snatch it from a rotting carcass? Did they steal it from a pagan altar dedicated to Baal? The text doesn't tell us, and that silence is deafening. The sheer scandal of a holy prophet eating from the beak of an unclean scavenger is enough to make any Orthodox priest of the time tear his garments. The discomfort with this passage is not a modern phenomenon. It is ancient. In fact, if you look back through the centuries of biblical translation and commentary, you will find a fascinating, almost desperate attempt by brilliant scholars to clean up this story. They tried to sanitize the narrative to protect Elijah's reputation. The Hebrew text in 1 Kings 17 uses the word orevim. In the original Hebrew, there were no written vowels, only consonants: ayin, resh, bet, mem. Depending on how you vocalize those consonants, that word can mean a few different things. It usually means ravens, but some scholars noticed that with a slight tweak, it could be read as orevim, which translates to Arabs or Bedouins. Others argued it could mean merchants or travelers. Still others suggested it referred to the inhabitants of a nearby town called Orbo. You can see the psychological relief in these alternative translations. How much more comfortable is it to imagine a group of friendly, hospitable nomadic Arabs secretly bringing bread and meat to the prophet in hiding, or a caravan of merchants slipping him some supplies? It removes the theological tension completely. It makes the story neat, hygienic, and perfectly compliant with religious law. It saves Elijah from the embarrassment of the unclean. Consider the mental gymnastics required to change ravens to Arabs or merchants. The great medieval scholars, as brilliant as they were bound by a deep desire to protect the dignity of the prophets. They looked at the text and thought, surely the Almighty would not humiliate his servant. But this instinct to protect God from his own narrative is one of the most dangerous things we can do as readers of the text. When we try to act as God's public relations department, smoothing out the rough edges, we rob the text of its power. God does not need our editing. The overwhelming consensus of the best textual evidence, the ancient translations like the Septuagint, and the broader context of the narrative, confirm that it was indeed ravens, the birds, the scavengers. God did not send polite merchants. He sent the scavengers, and he did so intentionally. If we accept the sanitized version, we are left with a nice, palatable story about human hospitality. But if we face the uncomfortable, gritty reality of the ravens. We are forced to confront a God who operates far outside the neat, tidy boxes of our religious expectations. We are forced to look at a God who commands the unclean to serve the holy. Before we move on, if you are finding this deep dive helpful and want a resource to help you uncover more hidden truths in Scripture on your own, I have something that will genuinely assist you. Just click the link in the first pinned comment to find out more. Now let's look at where God sends Elijah next. This brings us to the profound theological midpoint of Elijah's journey. The location where this happens is not an accident. God tells Elijah to hide by the brook of Cherith. In Hebrew, the word cherith comes from a root verb that means to cut, to sever, or to cut down. It is the place of cutting. When we read this story, we often view Cherith merely as a geographical hideout, a safe house from Jezebel's assassins. But it was far more than that. Cherith was a divine scalpel. It was an operating table for the prophet's soul. Elijah had just stood before the king. He was powerful, zealous, and perhaps a little bit proud of his own righteousness. He was the sole defender of Yahweh in a corrupt nation. But before God could use Elijah for the massive public miracles on Mount Carmel, before he could call down fire from heaven, God had to break him down in the silence of the ravine. Think about the daily reality of this experience. Twice a day, morning and evening, Elijah has to look up at the sky and wait for a bird of prey to bring him his survival. He is utterly helpless. He cannot farm. He cannot hunt. He cannot buy food. He is dependent on a creature that, by its very nature, should not be feeding him. The raven's instinct is to consume, to hoard, to take for itself. For a raven to consistently deliver fresh bread and meat, day after day, without eating it, requires a continuous, active suspension of its natural biological instincts by the Creator. If the Creator can suspend the deepest, most selfish instincts of the most avaricious nature, making it deliver life-sustaining food, then he has total, absolute sovereignty over the chaos of the human condition. God is demonstrating to Elijah that he is not limited by the natural order, nor is he limited by the religious structures that men have built to understand him. But the cutting of Cherith goes deeper than just physical dependence. It is a cutting away of religious pride and prejudice. Elijah was a strict, law-abiding Israelite. The law said the raven was unclean. Yet, God was using the unclean to preserve the holy. By forcing Elijah to eat from the beak of the raven, God was systematically dismantling his theological superiority complex. He was teaching the prophet that God's grace and God's provision cannot be confined by human categories of clean and unclean, worthy and unworthy. This was not just a magic trick to keep a man from starving. It was a rigorous, deeply uncomfortable pedagogical process. Why? Because of where Elijah had to go next. If you read the very next paragraph in 1 Kings 17, the brook of Cherith dries up, the water stops flowing, and God gives Elijah his next set of instructions. He tells him to go to Zarephath, to a widow there who will feed him. Zarephath was not in Israel. It was in Sidon. Phoenicia, it was Gentile territory. Worse, it was the very heartland of Baal worship. It was Queen Jezebel's hometown. And God is sending his elite, holy prophet to be sustained by a starving, pagan, Gentile widow. In the eyes of an ancient Israelite, that widow was just as ritually impure, just as socially unacceptable, just as far outside the covenant as the ravens themselves. Do you see the masterful architecture of God's curriculum? If Elijah had not first learned to accept grace from the beak of an unclean bird, in the isolation of Cherith, he would never have possessed the humility to accept grace from the hands of an unclean foreigner in the pagan city of Zarephath. The ravens were the prerequisite. They were the shock therapy needed to expand Elijah's understanding of God's radical, boundary-breaking mercy. God was showing him that his salvation was not just for the elite, not just for the religiously pure, but that he could use the outcasts, the foreigners, and the scavengers to accomplish his will. This journey from the arid ravine of Cherith does not end in the Old Testament. The shadow of the raven flies across the centuries, landing squarely in the teachings of Jesus Christ, connecting the dust of the ancient prophets to the vibrant reality of the new covenant. Centuries later, Jesus is standing before a crowd of anxious, worried, exhausted people. They are stressed about their lives, what they will eat, what they will wear. And Jesus, the master storyteller, the fulfillment of all the law and the prophets, tells them to look at the birds. But in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, Jesus is very specific. He does not point to the majestic eagle soaring in the thermals. He does not point to the peaceful, pure dove. He says, "Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Consider the ravens. Out of all the birds in the sky, Jesus chooses the scavenger, the unclean, the outcast, the bird of death." When Jesus told his disciples to consider the ravens, imagine the looks on their faces. These were good, observant Jewish men. They knew their Leviticus. They knew that observing a raven usually meant avoiding it. To actively study it, to look to it as a model of God's providence, was a radical paradigm shift. Jesus was challenging the very foundation of their religious anxiety. He was saying, "You are exhausted because you are trying to earn your purity, trying to secure your own future. Stop. Look at the bird you despise. It rests entirely on the unmerited grace of the Creator." Jesus was speaking to a people who felt unclean. He was speaking to the marginalized, the poor, the sinners, who felt like they were on the outside of the religious establishment looking in. The Pharisees and the religious elite viewed the common people, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, much like they viewed the ravens, impure, untouchable, best to be avoided, lest you become contaminated. But Jesus flips the script entirely. He says, "Look at the raven. It brings absolutely nothing to the table. It has no barns. It has no agricultural resume. It has a bad reputation. It is selfish by nature. And yet, the Creator of the universe notices it, cares for it, and feeds it." If God extends His providential care to the most despised creature of the sky, how much more does He fiercely, passionately love you, even in your mess, even in your brokenness, even in your impurity? Throughout His entire earthly ministry, Jesus embodied the lesson of Cherith. He spent His time sitting at the table with the ravens of society. He touched the lepers, absorbing their impurity. He allowed a sinful woman to wash His feet with her tears. He invited a corrupt tax collector down from a tree and went to his house for dinner. The religious leaders of the day were scandalized. They essentially asked, "How can this holy prophet eat with scavengers?" They didn't understand what Elijah had to learn the hard way, that the grace of God is drawn to the broken, the impure, and the desperate. But the connection goes even deeper, straight to the core of the Christian gospel. Jesus didn't just teach about the ravens, He stepped into our reality. He became the ultimate Elijah, entering the ultimate wilderness of human suffering. Think about the cross, Golgotha, the place of the skull. It was a place of execution, a place of death, a place where scavengers gathered. When Jesus hung on the cross, He did not just sympathize with our impurity. The New Testament tells us He actually took it upon Himself. 2 Corinthians 5 says that God made Him who had no sin to be sin for us. Jesus absorbed the ultimate tuma, the ultimate uncleanness of human rebellion, greed and selfishness. He took the venom of our nature into his own body. He went into the ultimate Cherith, the ultimate place of cutting. He was cut off from the land of the living. He was severed from the Father so that we could be brought in. And through that horrific, beautiful sacrifice, Jesus became the true bread of life. Not bread brought by a bird, but his own body, broken for us, offered freely in the wilderness of this world to sustain us on our journey. The scandal of the raven in the Old Testament is a direct foreshadowing of the ultimate scandal of the cross, a Messiah executed like a criminal. If you cannot accept the raven, you will ultimately struggle to accept the cross, because both require us to find salvation in a place of profound shame. Let us linger here for a moment and truly absorb the weight of this. We are so quick to cast ourselves as the heroes in biblical narratives. We read the story of Elijah, and we want to be the prophet. We want to be the one standing boldly against the culture, calling down fire, speaking truth to power. We want to be the holy vessel used by God to change the world. But the profoundly humbling truth, the reality that the scalpel of Cherith reveals, is that in our natural state, we are not the prophet. We are the ravens. By nature, we are driven by self-preservation. We are hoarders of our time, our money, our affection. We scavenge for validation, for power, for comfort, often at the expense of others. Our instincts are bent inward. We are flawed. We carry the impurity of our own failures, and we are entirely incapable of sustaining ourselves spiritually. Left to our own devices, we are driven by the same chaotic, consuming appetites that define the scavengers of the desert. Yet, the breathtaking beauty of the gospel is that God does not look at us in our raven-like state with disgust. He does not turn his face away and seek out a purer, more noble creature to do his will. Instead, he overrides our nature with his grace. Just as God commanded the ravens at Cherith, suspending their greed and turning them into instruments of life, God's Spirit enters into our messy, selfish lives and transforms us. He takes our brokenness and uses it to deliver grace to others. He takes people who have scavenged in the dark and turns them into messengers of light. Every time you, in your imperfection, choose to forgive someone who hurt you, you are a raven dropping bread. Every time you share what you have with someone in need, fighting against your own instinct to hoard, you are a raven delivering meat. Every time you speak a word of life to a friend in the wilderness of their own depression or grief, God is using the unclean to sustain the weary. This is the great paradox of the kingdom of heaven. God delights in using the unlikely, the unqualified, and the impure to confound the wise and the strong. He doesn't need perfect vessels. He needs available ones. The story of Elijah's ravens is a testament to the fact that no one is beyond the reach of God's redemptive power, and no one is too flawed to be used in his grand narrative of salvation. If we understand this, it changes everything about how we view ourselves and how we view others. It destroys our religious elitism. We can no longer look down on the people we deem unclean or far from God, because we recognize that we were sitting in the exact same dirt when grace found us. We are all beggars telling other beggars where to find bread. We are all ravens, inexplicably chosen, relentlessly loved, and commissioned to fly into the deserts of this world, carrying the sustenance of Christ. We often build our modern churches to be safe havens, sterile environments, where the messy realities of life are left at the door. We want doves and lambs. We want peace and purity. But the reality of truly following Christ is that it is often a ministry among the scavengers. It is messy. It involves walking into the dark places, dealing with addiction, broken marriages, profound grief, and deep-seated selfishness. If we are not willing to engage with the ravens, we are not truly participating in the ministry of Jesus. We must learn to see the potential for grace in the places that society has deemed untouchable. As we reflect on the silence of the Kerith Ravine, we have to ask ourselves about our own wilderness experiences. Perhaps you feel like you are in a season of drought right now. The streams of income, of relationships, of spiritual vitality seem to have dried up. You feel isolated. You feel like you have been cut off, placed in a hidden ravine where the world has forgotten you. It is in these exact moments that the lesson of Elijah becomes intensely personal. Cherith is not a punishment. It is a preparation. When God hides you, He is not abandoning you. He is refining you. He is stripping away the noise, the distractions, and the self-reliance. He is forcing you to look up. And sometimes, the provision God sends in the wilderness does not look the way we expect it to. We pray for a majestic eagle to swoop down and rescue us, and instead, God sends a raven. He uses the irritating coworker to teach us patience. He uses a financial setback to teach us dependence. He uses the very things we might consider deeply uncomfortable or even impure by our own standards to sustain us and break down our pride. Are we willing to accept the bread, even if it comes from a beak we despise? Are we willing to let God be God, operating outside of our theological boxes and our comfort zones? Elijah had to learn that the God who commands the drought also commands the scavengers. The God who controls the macro events of history, the rise and fall of kings like Ahab, is equally sovereign over the micro details of a bird's flight path. There is no chaotic variable in your life that is outside of His redemptive jurisdiction. When the brook finally dried up, Elijah was ready. He didn't panic. He had learned the rhythm of grace. He stood up, dusted off the desert sand, and walked into foreign territory to love a widow he would have previously despised. The raven had done its job. The scalpel had finished its work. The Bible is not a collection of sanitized fables designed to make us feel comfortable. It is a raw, jagged, profoundly realistic mirror held up to the human condition, revealing the relentless, boundary-breaking pursuit of a God who refuses to let us die in our own deserts. The story of the ravens is an invitation to let go of our neat, predictable versions of faith. It is a call to embrace the wild, untamed grace of a Creator who can take the symbols of death and turn them into the very vehicles of life. It reminds us that whether we are the exhausted prophet hiding in the rocks or the selfish raven flying through the sky, we are inextricably caught up in a story of mercy that is far larger, far deeper, and far more beautiful than we could ever comprehend. So, the next time you feel unqualified, the next time you look at your own flaws and assume God could never use someone with your past or your struggles, remember the black wings descending over the Kerith Ravine. Remember that the God of Israel specializes in the redemption of the unclean. If He can use a raven to sustain a prophet, and if He can use a cross to save the world, imagine what He can do with the broken, beautiful pieces of your life. This journey through the ancient texts always reveals something new about our own hearts. I'm curious about where this message is finding you today. What kind of wilderness are you currently navigating? And where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and let's continue this conversation. And if you want to uncover more of the profound, hidden truths beneath the surface of the biblical text, there is another story waiting for you right there on the screen.